Commercial bike riders represent one of the fastest and most dynamic areas of business in this country.
Generally, there are cohorts of people that are considered unruly, thieves, ex-child soldiers, ex-police officers, and so they're not really people that are given a fair chance.
I mean, there's been a lot of running battles with the authorities over time, and at the time the new Minister of Internal Affairs introduced a ban on bike riding, commercial bike riding in the central business district of Freetown. The bike riders in Sierra Leone started probably more or less towards the end of the war, coincided with the end of the war, and it's grown up across large parts of Africa as a means of transportation in a place where often infrastructure isn't well developed, but also as a source of job creation for young people. So it started actually not in Freetown, but in other parts of the country. But of course, it's a big factor here in Freetown. And last year, I think it was at some stage. I mean, there's been a lot of running battles with the authorities over time, and at the time the new Minister of Internal Affairs introduced a ban on bike riding, commercial bike riding.
There was a situation where they were told that they have to stop riding in certain part of the city because of the nuisance that they cause to traffic and the crime rates and things. What happened then was a big demonstration. The Bike Riders Union organized a mass demonstration across the country. And for the first time, there was a big scare.
I got involved at that stage, became interested in the issue, because we all have a love-hate relationship with bike riders in some ways. I mean, we appreciate them as a provider of services, but we also find them sometimes lawless and reckless and so on, and there's a huge story to tell just in that. But I suspected that this policy, this ban, didn't really get to the heart of the matter.
The bike riding population of young people was really high, and we realized that there was a lot of young people there that are sustaining themselves in that trade. So technically, it is employment, but it's such an unregulated sector. It's such a big sector in Sierra Leone, and it's a sector also that's plagued with a lot of problems, from policy, government, to people, to civil unrest. All of these issues are tagged to these young people who are on these bikes, providing transportation to a populace that occupies this city.
I mean, commercial bike riders represent one of the fastest and most dynamic areas of business in this country. You have an opportunity for young people or people from all backgrounds and different circumstances to create a living, a livelihood for themselves. The commercial bike riders were so integral in the post-war rehabilitation of ex-combatants, but throughout their tenure in this country, they've been labelled with a degree of stigma.
Generally, there are a cohort of people that are considered unruly, thieves, ex-child soldiers, ex-police officers, and so they're not really people that are given a fair chance in this society.
The call really for this project was about how can we best rebrand, redefine, reposition commercial bike riders in mainstream society in Sierra Leone. How can we identify opportunities for them to expand and develop and harness their businesses, to provide different services, and to also change their public perception about commercial bike riders.
From Sensi's perspective, we saw a problem. We saw a situation where a lot of young people were losing their means of sustaining themselves and employment. We decided to approach the union, and from their side, help them find ways to be sustainable as a union. That's number one. Number two, to find interventions that could keep the bike riding space appealing to the government so that the government could slowly begin to take back the restrictions.
We identified some of the underlying issues that we thought were affecting them. So, for example, the lack of skills, the fact that you had hundreds and thousands of bike riders, you have a union, but there was no registration system. So it meant that they didn't really know who was on the streets riding.
So we did several interventions. As an innovation hub, we supported them with a database that would help them organize themselves, that would help them register themselves. We tried to link that database to the National Social Security Council so that these guys can also contribute their social security fees via this database. The database will enable them to have unique identification numbers. So if there is an accident, if there is a commotion somewhere, you're able to identify a rider. Because these were some of the issues that the ministry and the police officers that we spoke to when we were setting up this project had with the bike riders.
Basically, this database system, Sensi Tech Hub, train 22 people in the force. Now the various pack them, we take leaders them, chairman and other executive members, including the regional executive. And we don't stop there. For make this year so it will be more correct and we not go stop on a Freetown. Other people we can take after we will be involved with national executive, then say and come from and train we all with the national executive. Out of these 22 people, 16 people may finish this particular training, so successful one. And we start the particular program.
We quickly identify how well organized they were as an agency, and we decided to pilot a training program in the western urban region, and we targeted that training program to include one representative from each of the 54 parks that were within this catchment area. That representative was their designated health focal person, and they came along to this training, all 54 of them, and we gave them some basic and quite intensive training on first aid and how to deliver first aid.
It was very difficult because also you're dealing with a highly disorganized group of people, disorganized structures. We underestimated how much work it was going to take to work with these guys. But because we had committed, we gave a lot of our resources and our time to organize them, to work with them. So they saw that came across that these people are genuinely trying to help us.
Sensi Tech Hub make provision for we get computers now where they don't train people from this database out of this 60 years. So what would they use? If problem happen automatically, when they call we lines them they all around. When they call we just go into the person, click the pack, we come out in pack number. Automatically, the person name and personal information, all we will get. And the person who can stand as guarantor, this person itself will get.
We realized that in Western area alone, there was 33,000 bike riders based on information they gave us from their last election. So we knew very well there's a big number of them here. And we knew there's a potential for them to sell helmets and high-vis jackets to their cohorts, as the government has enforced this as a law, that every single bike rider should wear a helmet. If the union stepped into that space as a marketeer of these type of products, which is also in some ways providing safety, but and also it would provide them a steady income. They now have an office that we've helped them set up, and they have a shop.
As responsible union, you understand, they often come and take responsibility for this apron, reflective aprons and the crash helmet, because without this, I mean, you actually you not go no say you don't do the correct thing, because actually you get for obey the rules and regulations of the government and the union as well.
Most of our activities with the union has been focused because of limited resources in the western area, which is why we keep quoting the western area of 33,000. But they believe that there is even more of these people in the eastern part of Freetown where they've gone to set up their office. And most of them, the people that work for the union and the leadership reside in that area. And also, finding a property in the western area was much more expensive as opposed to finding a property in the eastern area. So this was one of the reasons why the office was located there. You'd find that there is much more of an urbanly dense population there, and it's a good place strategically for them to be with an office that's trying to organize themselves.
At the start, it was really difficult to see a kind of coordination with activity and plans in terms of implementation, because they don't have a kind of physical infrastructure like an office space and a full-time staff. Most of them, the BMOs were all scattered around. The executive of the Salcombo West, they don't have an office space, and also in terms of attitude. But basically, we saw those challenges as an opportunity to bring change to the entire process.
I think the future for bike riders, as I said, as a starting place, moving into other avenues, other pursuits, other business, other activities, is actually quite bright. So it's a question of us staying the course. Setbacks will come, but for as long as they have the vision and they have the leadership and they're demonstrating, which they have amply done so, then we should stick with them and work with them.
For us, we could only go as far as our resources could stretch, but the approaches were well thought through, to the point that we thought about a plan beyond the money. What could they do? Ultimately, the little bit that we did was to give them a business to ensure that they constantly have the money to support their activities, to continuously show the Sierra Leonean people that they're a responsible member of society that are just trying to maintain a way of living.